Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday evening. Here was something a little bit different today. It's throwing me off even on the intro here. So I'm not just jumping right into NBA, but hey, NBA is on a break, and I cut my teeth last year starting to cap Major League Baseball. Really enjoyed it, but I definitely have not done the work to know much about it. So we want to do a Major League preview. Who better to bring in than JJ from BetCrushers, who has done a ton of work on this stuff, man. So how you doing tonight?
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm doing all right. Live from the dining room.
I'm live from my office where I have to blur the background because I'm still getting all the whole
I should do
stats.
that. Gotcha. I should do that too.
Yeah, man, excited to have you here tonight. So JJ and I started interacting a while back. Really appreciated him. Just super encouraging guy, but also really knowledgeable. Really dives into things, whether it's baseball, NASCAR, different stuff, kind of like I enjoy doing the NBA, really getting into the details and the data. And so excited to talk to him tonight about what we can expect here. So first up, man, why don't you talk to me? Are we going to have a baseball season?
Of course,
Okay.
right?
All right. I just hear the rumors of like cataclysmic,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And who knows? I mean, anything's possible, especially with the knucklehead that's running the whole operation. But yeah, I mean, it's there's too much at risk to not play something, whether it's 100, 120, 140. But look, the bottom line is, as far as apart they are right now, midweek, end of February, they're meeting. They met 2 days in a row, which is an accomplishment of its own right.
Yeah.
They haven't run each other out of the room yet. Both sides have kind of, given in on some things, and, sure, they were a little wacky, off the wall, bad, a couple of them were kind of bad ideas to begin with, but it's negotiation that happens. Starting off with really oddball stuff is not necessarily always, typical with negotiations, but now it's kind of coming down to the numbers, which, that's what it's always been about. But there were some structural things, that were some stuff that if you don't really understand the structure of baseball rosters and things like that, the options, number of options for a player, stuff like that doesn't really mean much to most fans, and it shouldn't. I mean, realistically, but those are the sorts of things that we're talking about. Pay, the owners having to pay certain things, and these younger players, this younger talent coming due quicker, which means they are owed more, even, in a sooner date. Okay. So those are some of the structural things that are at odds, that as fans, we want to see the best product. We want to see, Wander Franco play the whole season, and Chris Bryant, that notorious case, years back, or even people calling for Jared Kelenic to start on, day one last year for the Mariners. There is what they call manipulation, and, there's pros and cons. It's a business, but the players want to be treated a little better in that regard. So that's something that they're willing to fight for. And I think you're going to see them come together. I'm not an expert. I'm not an insider. I don't know anything more than, anybody else that would take the time to listen or read, good sources. But I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. They'll get out there hopefully soon. I mean, it could be, they could have something done in a couple of weeks. It could be a month.
Was it this week that pitchers and catchers initially would have reported? Is that true?
It was last week.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. 15, so we're already 14. Past that sort of artificial start. Obviously, that doesn't put a season in danger or anything, but we are getting into the time where stuff's supposed to be happening. So
shaving. The calendar is going to get shaved here before too long.
Yeah. Man, that sucks. I just honestly I've seen what I see on Twitter, and then I read like 1.5 articles about it. So when you say you don't know a ton, it's like you still know 10 times more than I do about what's going on with this stuff. So definitely hope they get it worked out, man. Because
me too.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, so what we talked about is kind of doing a 5 up, 5 down kind of thing. As you look at the teams going into this season. Let's start out with the 5 teams that you think are trending upward or have reason to be positive heading into this season.
Sure. And obviously our caveat right now, sitting here, the 22nd, 2/22/22, sitting here, we still have basically a second half of free agency and potential trades to take place. So, a lot of what I'm looking at is based off of, certain guys not being on their returning, a Freddie Freeman not returning to Atlanta. So if he comes back to Atlanta, obviously you're having to make certain adjustments, things like that, where some of these guys are going to resign. Even Kyle Schwarber, could resign with Boston, those sorts of things. You still have Chris Bryant out there, Nick Castellanos. So, some big kind of type of players that can affect the team's bottom line by 3 wins, 4 wins, 2 wins, something like that. But
yeah, for sure.
hey, we're playing with the hand that we've been dealt, right?
Yeah.
So
Those are big names though, for sure. Lots to go down still.
Correa and Story, two big shortstops,
Okay.
So, a lot of beef out there. So yeah, definitely is going to play a part here once the calendar starts back up for the preseason.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Well, what are you looking at for now as
right.
things stand?
I mean, I'm going to start off with obvious chalk, and I'm going to take a Texas Rangers team that it was a 60-win team last year. They made the most noise, I'd say, in this part 1 of free agency, just bringing in Marcus Semien. I mean, we're talking long-term deals with Marcus Semien, Corey Seager. I mean, it instantly juices up the infield, the lineup, So, I mean, these are long-term deals with instant dividends. They brought in John Gray from Colorado.
Okay.
He's a plus replacement for Jordan Lyles, who left. So he's kind of filling that role. Jordan Lyles was terrible. John Gray is good, and he gets you innings. But when we're talking about year-over-year performance, that's a big change. So you have to factor that. Big change there in rotation. This team had the 3rd lowest slugging in 2021. Gets massive upgrades, and that's really important for being able to have a reliable offense night after night. If you have poor slugging, you're really relying on a lot more chain of events type of things to be able to score. With consistent slugging, you can score more efficiently. So the bottom line here is they go from 3rd lowest slugging, and they're going to pop pretty well just with having those 2 guys. You have IKF was a big part of their success at shortstop. Now he's kind of like a depth guy, or even take over third base until they get some young players up. First baseman Nathaniel Lowe, sneaky good bat. So you're getting improvement from within as well. So not only importing guys, but you're getting some improvement from some younger players. The problem I have, I guess, the caveat, pump the brakes, is the outfield itself. Defense takes a big hit, not having Joey Gallo there for the full season. He was obviously gone for the second half. But I'm not really sure about this group. So I have questions there. So that kind of, is a little bit of a balancing force. This rotation, just like the offense, they had the 3rd worst ERA and FIP in the league. So Jordan Lyles is gone. Mike Foltynewicz is gone. But they have some, good younger crop that looks interesting, but still yet a little improvement. So Dane Dunning, Taylor Hearn, Spencer Howard, especially, can he, put together a fuller season and make the most of it, progress their career. So there's a lot of development that still needs to take place with the rotation, but they have a good stabilizing guy with John Gray, at least. Really, otherwise the bullpen, I think, is going to be a limiting factor. They don't really have proven depth or high leverage experience. But here we're talking about there's still free agency, and this team has already shown that it's willing to spend, and they're willing to spend on guys that can deliver now. So it's hard to tell if they pick up a couple decent bullpen pieces and maybe another starting pitcher, they could even be better. Right now, I mean, we're talking about massive improvements for a basement team.
Right.
The bar was low last year. And, but I think right now, the way things shape up, they kind of are around 75 wins. I mean, they can tack on another 15 wins just with some improvements from within and the guys they brought in.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually going to ask you, and you spoke to it, about the development of the guys that they had there. Cause I'm going a lot off of what I remember from capping it last year, and definitely some of those names you said as pitchers, it was fading them a lot of times, or Dane Dunning maybe looking for some strikeouts or something. But, but I do think that some of those guys did get a lot of experience last year. So that's what I was going to ask you about, is bringing in some guys, but also there were times that their offense did pop in the second half of the season. I mean, they, score poorly for numerous games in a row, but maybe that experience is good for some of those guys combining with bringing some people in. So
absolutely. I mean, they had, some really good Adolis Garcia, had, a lot of contributions there. I think my question is whether that was legit, or we're going to see kind of half that this year. Again, if he, if I'm wrong and he is, again, very above average, you start to see some of those pieces. If Corey Seager can stay healthy, they could even exceed that. But this is obviously we're looking at this market base. The win totals are obviously not up for teams because we still have a lot of free agents.
Right.
But I don't think so. Even though I'm saying, this is a team that is one of the bigger gainers so far. The market's going to reflect that as well. It's obvious the talent that they brought in that they're going to be much better in a 60 win team.
Okay, awesome. So the Texas Rangers. What's the next one you're looking at?
I'm going to go with the Angels. And I mean, obviously, you've got reigning AL MVP.
All right.
Ohtani. Mike Trout is going to come back. Granted, he's 30 years old, center fielder, so we'll see how that goes. But the knock has always been against their pitching. They're basically a 77-win team from last year. And the thing is, you get Trout back. Okay, I get that. The problem that I have with him, again, with the pitching, I think this is why maybe I'm a little less I'm on the lower side of right now. What I have worked up is a win range of about 83 to 93 wins. And I'm kind of on the low end. I need to be convinced about the rotation. I'll be honest with that. Ohtani returns as the only starter from last year to put up more than 100 innings. They said goodbye to Alex Cobb, Dylan Bundy, and Andrew Haney. I know Haney and Bundy just struggled, but they put up a lot of innings. Cobb's season was limited, but he was really good, so you kind of lost three guys that were big contributors in one form or another, whether it be innings or performance. But it's one that's in transition. I mean, you've got Noah Syndergaard fresh off an injury, but he could easily make up a gap of both Bundy and Haney leaving, not necessarily workload wise, but as far as performance. But they're still going to have to eat innings. Patrick Sandoval, Jose Suarez really need to increase their workload, be able to be resilient to increase that workload, because we're talking about, a really good bullpen, but the more you put on the shoulders of a bullpen, the easier it can be to break down. So I think that's pretty important. We're going to see how are they going to use Michael Lorenzen. He was a guy who was transitioning in Cincinnati from reliever to starter, but got hurt and all that got delayed last year. Probably call back up Reed Detmers, 22-year-old. So they have some options there, but there's just a lot of questions. Bullpen, I think just top notch, one of the better back ends. Still weak, I guess you would say, in terms of middle relief, eating some innings a little bit. For as far as high leverage guys, Rysel Iglesias is one of the better, even one of the best closers in the league. I mean, his fastball was as hard as ever last year. Super effective changeup slider. So you have him, and then he's backed up with Mike Myers and Toronto free agent Aaron Loop. So I think it's a really, really stout back end. Just not sure about the middle of it.
Yeah.
So.
What do you think? So I'm looking to the side here because I'm just pulling up rosters and looking while we're talking at who you're talking about. What do you think in terms of offensively for the Angels? I remember last year, at least as far as my memory serves, without Trout, they actually had times where they put up a lot of runs and it felt like Ohtani was all they had, really up and down, at least is what I remember. But I'm looking at the roster here. Is it true that Rendon was injured a lot of last year?
Yeah. He sidelined. He had a hip injury. So
they get him and they get Trout. I mean, do you think that offense is trending pretty positively compared to last year?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. Obviously Trout, Rendon, if he can stay healthy-ish, he's still been very good. The way he left Washington was, that was a phenomenal season for him. That was hard to, I think, reasonably expect from him year over year. But he's been very good when he's been on the field. But we saw how much better this team can be with Jared Walsh at first base, with Pujols gone. I mean, he's a 30 home run, 500 slugging type of first baseman, what you want at first base. The concern, I think we're going to find out whether they add a big piece, whether they add a big shortstop. They really need shortstop. Carlos Correa, I don't know if, Story Correa would be the guy here, but that would be a massive improvement to this team. I don't think that Tyler Wade is going to be their starting shortstop come opening day. So somebody's going to be brought in there. So you're going to see some more improvement there because Jose Iglesias at short was a disaster last year. So again, we're talking about, what's the baseline? What's the type of improvement or decline year over year when I'm looking at win totals? So, I think there's a lot of room for improvement at shortstop by just bringing in maybe even just a solid guy. That's really
Yeah.
all it would take. But the thing that's kind of like to keep an eye on is what are we going to see out of the outfield? Without Trout, they were really, didn't have an anchor, didn't have somebody to really pick up a lot of slack. But it did give a couple of their younger players, Brandon Marsh, Joe Adele, gave them some valuable reps out there. So they've got to see another season in the books. And so we're going to need to see what they have out there with Trout. Justin Upton is, kind of washed. So
Yeah.
those two really need to be able to take care of business in their second years.
I like this one, especially like you said, if they can acquire somebody at shortstop. Just looking through this lineup, there's some good pieces there. So if they can add another strong offensive player into that lineup to kind of slot in between some of the, maybe okay pieces.
Yeah.
Man, that looks definitely positive for what they could come up with this year. So
yeah, but here's the thing: is they kind of this is just how they are. You have to be careful. And my friends out here out east, Philly fans and things like that, they remind me that the Mets do Mets type of things,
right?
And the Angels are kind of like a West Coast Mets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they just can look really good. Man, this is going to be an 87 win team, something like that. It's just always something. That's usually the pitching. I'm not sold on the pitching. Ohtani's a really good pitcher, but look, they lost a lot of innings. Syndergaard could be fantastic, and Sandoval and Suarez could pick up, 150, 160 innings and be really good. This could be a very good rotation, but past history shouldn't give you a lot of optimism.
Yeah. Great, man. Great breakdown. I love it. All right. So we got 2 down. What's the third team looking up?
I'm going to go with, kind of another chalky type of thing, but, I'm going to look at the Yankees, and it sounds funny. They're a 92 win team, but they fell below expectation. I think their win total closed at 95.5, but when you think about it and you look at the numbers, 711 runs was 19th in the majors, a pedestrian 407 slugging, and you had names like Judge, Stanton with really good years. These guys were 35, 39, home run guys. And you eventually had Rizzo and Gallo, even though Gallo struck out, I think, like 38, 39% of the time when he was in New York. But look, you get a full season of Gallo with the short porch. He's a 40 home run, 100 RBI kind of guy with, especially with a couple other bangers in the lineup. But he's like a 200 average guy. So it's really interesting. But what you need, and especially in that ballpark, they need power. And they've got it with Judge, another typical 39 home run type of season. Stanton was really good, 35 homers. But it's all about the supporting cast, really. We know those guys, with the exception of Stanton and maybe some of his injury, stretches. It's the supporting cast. Aaron Hicks, is Gleyber Torres going to kind of rebound? The second half of last year would probably give you an indication that he's, still got it in him. But, kind of the catching situation, Gary Sanchez is, I don't know. And, but are they going to fill a spot? Are they going to pick up a Story or Correa to play shortstop? Again, that's the type of guy that can really turn around even a really good offense and lineup like this.
Yeah. I just looking at this offense, man, I remember after those trades, looking at betting the Yankees and just expecting them to explode offensively on a regular basis, betting the over for runs in the first 5, team totals, that kind of stuff. And I know they did at times, but at least it felt to me like they underperformed for the talent that they had on the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of, where that shook out. And, arguably, I think the competition in their division was even stronger.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The Rays were stronger than strong, and you had a Toronto that was supposed to be strong, and Boston was unexpectedly strong. So, and a fair amount of that was with some really good pitching. Even better than I think you could expect from some of those guys this year. So that might have something to do with it. But again, I think a full season of Gallo in that park does a lot. He's also a really good defender too. So, I think that's a big help. The rotation is obviously, that's one of their calling cards, despite the fact that there's some questions. You know, Cole is not one, obviously. You know, he's
Right.
a 180 inning guy, you know, 3 FIP, 5 to 6 WAR. You pretty much count on that out of him, even though he kind of, you know, he had a hamstring injury towards the end of the season last year, I think. But nonetheless, you know, I mean, he's gonna deliver that. So really, it's about, all right, what are we doing with 2 through 5? Luis Severino is back. I mean, he easily covers what what limited amount Corey Kluber did.
Mm.
You know, even if he doesn't have a totally healthy season, but I think he's really the X factor in the fact that if he can stay healthy and be good, that is a lot that really fills some holes, you know, for this. Even though I'm super high on Jordan Montgomery as the number 2 behind Cole, he got back to 150 innings last year, 30 starts, you know, really solid. He's got a 5-pitch arsenal, just perfect type of starting pitcher mold, sharp curves, change ups. You know, I think the big thing for him is whether he can step up with another 20 more innings this year. Then that's going to be huge for this rotation. And then you obviously have a super good bullpen. It's not just Aroldis Chapman. I mean, the lion's share of this bullpen's value comes from workhorses like Jonathan Lesoaga. I always say his wrong name. That's why I write more than I talk. You know what I mean? And Chad Green, guys like that. And then they have like these, you know, kind of veteran types, Wandy Peralta, Joely Rodriguez. I think he was from Pittsburgh. You know, they provide support, but if Rodriguez pops, like, you know, some think, you know, he could be another one of those kind of back end, you know, transition, come in a trouble spot in the 6th, pitch the 7th type of a reliable guy. So I think 92 wins is the floor. They could easily get to 100 if they reclaim that power on offense.
Okay. This we don't have to get fully into all these other teams, but do you think the division is strong for them again? Will that be a challenge, or do you think the division looks a little softer?
I think, you know, Boston does look a little softer, but, you know, they're not one to necessarily count out. I think Toronto
Right.
is still legit. Toronto is still the real deal.
Okay.
Tampa is always going to be, I mean, they're one that I just undervalue. And it's because they just manage their pieces really well.
Hmm.
They have flexible guys, so you know they're able to kind of sneak in rest without losing a whole lot on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't seem like much, but over the course of a season, it adds up. And so they're one that I think are going to be good. Baltimore probably be better, but I mean, you still have a strong 3.5 teams in this division in Baltimore. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. Well, that gives us 3. Which team is number 4 on the list?
Yeah, we'll kind of do this a little quick. I'm going to go with the
Okay.
Twins.
Thank
And
you so much. Let's
yeah,
go. I got to get
so
my Twins hat ordered, man.
you do got to get your Twins hat. And, you know, I mean, it's a major caveat, but we're talking about, I mean, this team threw me for a loop last season. I thought they were going to challenge the White Sox. I had a season win total over ticket on them, which I, you know, was pretty much garbage, you know, a third of the way into the season.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, you know, kind of a weaker division. I mean, the Tigers are up and coming. KC is kind of up and coming. But you know, Cleveland, they're not as you know, tough as they were before. You know, so I think that helps the Twins' case, but I would have thought it would have helped their case last year.
Yeah.
The bottom line is they just simply failed to produce runs. Their lineup has continuity from last season. Andrelton Simmons is gone. I mean, he had an offensive disaster season. I mean, great defense, but you know, you kind of have that trade off. So, I mean, is Jorge Polanco, you know, filling that position? Luis Reyes at second, maybe. You know, they're not the best defensive, you know, middle infielders, but they're definitely upgrades offensively. But you know, I think the Twins can make noise if Byron Buxton can stay in center. I know that's kind of cliched. I know that's kind of an understatement. But this guy has like MVP type seasons, but the seasons are like 80 games long because of injuries. And that's the way he plays, whatever it may be. But he's a fantastic player. They signed him to a long-term extension. It's kind of, you know, incentive-laden, incentives mainly being, you know, him being on the field. So it's good to see, you know, everybody's interests aligned there.
Yeah.
So I don't see why they shouldn't be a little better offensively, even though they had the 9th best slugging in the league. It just were mid-pack when it came to scoring runs. I mean, when you look at the underlying metrics, it really should have been there. So, barring some really, really, really odd, unforeseen, or underwhelming performances by some of their just good, solid bats, they should be significantly better in the run scoring department next season. Rotation is just a big question. Bullpen is still pretty good. So I think it just comes down to the rotation. Still should be a 500 team unless they bring on some more, a little more pop or another good arm or two to really buoy the bullpen or buoy the rotation. But yeah, I mean, they let Barrios go to Toronto.
Yeah.
Kenta is recovering from Tommy John surgery. So, I mean, they get a Dylan Bundy. I mean, so at least he can eat innings. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that pitching will be interesting. Their offense really was frustrating last year because it felt like they had so much potential and it just didn't come through the majority of the time. So,
yeah, you look at the underlying. I kind of mentioned that. I mean, they had the 9th best slugging, 9th best WRC, so that's weighted to ballpark. They just didn't score the runs.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this year they will. They saved them all up from last year to use them this year.
Yeah,
that's what we'll hope for. All right. Which team is going to round out the 5 that are looking up here for you?
All right, so we'll do the Padres. This is kind of a little bit of almost an obvious pick. I mean, this is a 79 win team because of a second half collapse. This is not a 500 roster. I mean, it got the manager fired, and they get Oakland's manager. But this is not a 500 roster. I mean, this rotation has enough horsepower. They'll gain a few more wins over the rotation's performance last year with all the injuries. I mean, Joe Musgrove, he's a really good 3-WAR type of floor pitcher. I mean, he hit 181 innings last year, which is really important. You have Darvish, Snell, Clevinger, especially Mike Clevinger off of injury. There's a lot of variance to go with those 3 guys as part of the horsepower. So that's kind of where, there's a lot of fluctuation. What are we going to get out of Darvish? The Snell issues the 3rd time through the order, the 2nd time through the order, and Clevinger should be really good if he's healthy. You know what I mean? So, how much do we get out of Clevinger? So that's a pretty important part there, but I still think they got, really good arms to not be a bad rotation. They're better than a 500 rotation. Bullpen, it's better than average, but it's different. And different in the fact that it doesn't really have the heavy backhand, the lockdown closer, the 2 powerful, bring them in, set up guys. They just have a mature, deep group. So I think it's just a dependable kind of like, pieces, but I wouldn't be surprised if they, get a little bit of help there in that department. And obviously we know that there's plenty of talent in the Padres lineup. I mean, I guess Freddie Freeman would be a pretty good upgrade at first base. I mean, wouldn't you think that would be a pretty dangerous lineup right there?
Yeah.
But Tatis, I mean, he's legit. He's 600 slugger, 50 home runs. I think his defense will rebound from last year. He's an excellent shortstop. Just, had the yips there. Grisham, Cronenworth, I really like those guys. Again, not a 500 team. But my guess is the books will have them up there. I'm thinking maybe 92. I don't know if they'll get a total of 88 and a half, 89 and a half, something like that.
So when do lines come out on win totals? I mean, is that because of the stuff going on and not knowing how long the season will be and stuff?
Yeah, I can't remember. I've been trying to I think last year they first came out from pardon me, DraftKings.
You're good.
Okay. So I think I took a screenshot. The year before that, I can't remember who I saw him first. It was might have been actually a domestic in Vegas and saw it. So I saved them. But last year, I want to say it was sometime in February.
Wow.
But you figure a lot of the free agents had settled out and all that sort of thing. So
yeah, right.
We still have a lot of value on the board out there, and some potential trades too.
Well, so yeah. And so there aren't team totals probably because they don't know how long it'll be. I was just looking now and there are division winners.
Yes.
World Series winner, that kind of stuff. But
but I think lower limits, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. All right. Well, so that was the good news. Now we're going to see whose hearts we can break here. Let's hit up some teams that you think are in for a bit of a fall this year.
Well, and, just like the Texas Rangers, I'm going to go with kind of an obvious, chalky pick, if you will, and that's the Giants. I mean, they had the dream season of all dream seasons, 107 wins. They had a win total of
Yeah.
74 and a half.
My God.
So I mean, it was like blew most everybody's minds, as far as what they did. Fell short in the playoffs, but obviously 107 win team in a division with the Dodgers and the Padres, even if the Padres fell off a cliff. I mean, 107 wins is no joke. So
Yeah.
the problem is, and this is not, an industry secret or everything, but Buster Posey, I mean, he had a massive season last year. He's retired. Brandon Crawford had like his best season of his career at the age of 34. Their defense should still be very good, but I think, because of losses like that, the fact that Crawford dollars to donuts is not going to be able to repeat that at the age of 35. So I think you're going to see the offense take like 3 to 5% step back. Kevin Gausman is now in Toronto. I mean, he pitched 192 innings at 3 FIP. So, I mean, he had the 6th most innings pitched in the majors. So that's a ton of innings to make up. I mean, only DeSclafani from last season for them had more than 150 innings other than Gausman. So, so that's when you just start looking at volume to make up from that is pretty important. I think, 25-year-old Logan Webb, he's phenomenal. Last season, he had 2.72 FIP. Yep, that's what my notes. 60.7% ground ball rate. Of all starters in the MLB of 100 innings or more, that was the second best ground ball rate, and they had a very good infield defense. So it was just kind of like perfect type of situation. So he looked really good, but that's 40 innings less than what Gausman left off with last year. So not sure about Alex Cobb's durability. You're going to have some searching around Tyler Beatty, whatever, for their number 5 pitcher, but they're going to have a lot to pick up the slack there. Even if they do still have DeSclafani, Alex Wood were re-signed. I think there's stability there. They're very good pitchers. So that should be a strong part of there. But, we're talking about more pressure on a bullpen that already worked the 10th most innings last season. You had 4 key relievers in that bullpen with inflated xFIPs, low BABIP. So a lot of those signs to like, look, they pitched out of their minds. They pitched well beyond kind of what the underlying numbers, spoke to. So you have to, wonder if they're going to have more workload, and maybe they overachieved last year. I think the sole exception is probably Tyler Rogers, their submariner. He's an exceptionally good pitcher, but he went 81 innings last season. That's pretty hard. It's a hard ask to repeat. So, it's kind of, questions from top to bottom. They lost a lot and, overachieved. Still, I mean, this could be an 80-win team, but I'm probably lowballing them a little too much.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a pretty strong case against them. And there is at times in sports, it feels like a team just catches lightning in a bottle to some extent. And, you can't always find momentum in numbers, and momentum can fall off at any point, but there is something to just getting on a run and having a team that has a kind of a magical season. That's, sounds like nothing too solid there, but it happens,
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It does. And I mean, they had talented players. They had super talented players. They just, all, put it all together.
Yep.
For 165 games or something like that.
Yeah. It almost feels like the opposite of a team like the Twins to me, where they at least had some talent, but it was like they could just never put it together all the way. And then, you have another team that really does put it together. So what I'm saying is the Twins are going to win like 100 games this year. That's what I'm trying to say.
I thought they were going to win 86 and a half or something last year. So
yeah. So we'll see. All right. So Giants number 1. Who's the second team that might be hurting this year?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Athletics. And I think this one is a little, there's an understanding there that there's going to be some tougher times. They won 86 games last season. Kind of had to sweat the under 87 and a half wins, but we got there with them. But look, they lost Mark Canha, Starling Marte. They're with the Mets. I mean, when you total it up, 4.8 WAR between those two guys, and that's only the half season that Marte spent in Oakland. So that's a pretty big loss hole there, even though they will get Ramon Laureano back in center field. I think he still maybe has another 10, 20 games under suspension, but he has better defense, a little less at the plate than Marte did last season, but still a good player they're getting back. So at least part of that, loss from those two guys is muffled because they're going to get him back. The infield, I think, is in better shape than their outfield. The caveat there, unless they deal Matt Chapman or Matt Olson, those guys are rumored to be traded, one or the other. Chapman is still a great defensive third baseman. I mean, the concern is his big walk rate, but he's still a very, very good player and certainly marketable. Matt Olson absolutely is marketable. I mean, he's their team MVP, basically. 5 WAR at first base, where you get very little credit for defense. So that bat is potent and it's legit. The problem is you have guys like Elvis Andrus, Tony Kemp up the middle, just not really, the kind of guys that are going to power your lineup, even if they do add some on defense. The rotation returns all 5 starters again, unless one or more of them get dealt. I mean, Bassett, Minea, Montas, they're very good 3 WAR, 3-win caliber starters. You're going to see Cole or Irvin, James Kaprielian get pushed. They need more innings out of those guys, so keep an eye on them. I don't mind the rotation. I'm just not sure if all those guys are going to be there on opening day or before too long into the season, really. And bullpen's fine. I mean, they took a step back last year. I think, most of us saw that. But the losses that they have this year kind of even out. I mean, they're losing Soria and Petit. Both of them were pretty bad. And they lost Chafin and Diekman. They were both pretty good. So the losses kind of even out, but they have to fill those roles. There's a lot of unproven guys in the bullpen to carry a lot of weight, and it's probably going to be another weak spot for them. I just think, they're taking steps back already by those free agents leaving. And I'm certainly not convinced that they're going to have all of their key players by the time the trade deadline rolls around. So probably just right below 500 season.
Okay. That's an interesting thing too, when you're thinking about win totals, trying to project which teams might be sellers at the trade deadline and how that'll affect their win total. Right. So I mean, that was a rotation. I mean, just remembering back to the different pitchers that, maybe not anyone utterly outstanding, but pretty strong all the way through, not a huge fall off to anybody that they were pitching there. So
no, I mean, the bottom line was they gave their offense opportunities to win the game.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't dumpster fires by any sense. So those 3 guys, Bassett, Minea, and Montas, were, everybody has bad starts here and there, but they were, you knew that you had a chance with the Oakland team when they were on the bump for sure.
Yep. Okay. All right. So 2 down, 3 to go. What's the next team not looking so hot?
I got to go with my Reds, and I feel like I'm always a little bit pessimistic with them. And of course, I paid the price last year. I had their total under 82.5, and they got win 83 on the last game of the season.
Oh my gosh.
Good for them. But look, I mean, the fact that they got to that point because they had Pittsburgh for the last 3 games of the season.
Oh, yeah.
And I needed Pittsburgh to sweep them, and they got the first 2. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I you're going to get into it, but the Reds do feel like a team that sort of fell off at the end. Like they were hot for a while there. Everybody was on the Reds all the time. And
it was, and obviously like I said, I was sitting there with a, under win total ticket, and, they caught fire there right before the All-Star break. I mean, I think they ended off before the break with a sweep, or like 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4 from Milwaukee, who was kind of running away with the division. So there was a lot of optimism. The bats were clicking. It seemed like they started the season off. Okay, now I need to kind of slow down here. Now I'm talking about my team. They seemed to kind of start the season with the yips in the bullpen. They would have these good games. They put it together, decent start, got enough runs, and then blowing it. They were just blowing it. Then that kind of subsided, and then the bats went away. And then you had that period for a few weeks there before the All-Star break where just like everything was working.
Yeah.
Good starts, bats were clicking, and the bullpen was doing their job. And then, kind of stumbled out of the gates in the second half and stumbled down the stretch. But at least when I'm looking at this year, right now, and I don't have any indication that the front office is going to be like, moving on any big guns. They're probably going to let Nick Castellanos go, or they did let Castellanos go. I don't know if they're going to be able to resign Tucker Barnhart's in Detroit now. They let Wade Miley go, which doesn't sound great, but they let him go, and Chicago Snap picked him up, which is saying something, because you can make a strong argument that the Cubs are behind the Reds in terms of what they're going to be able to do this year, not necessarily long term, but they lost some key parts. But kind of like the what we were talking about with San Francisco, to a degree, you had guys like Joey Votto with 36 home runs, 140 WRC plus, and we're talking about he's 38 years old, so like you can't expect that again. Jesse Winker had a career season. Could he be as good? Could he be better? Maybe. I mean, he is a really good hitter, a very good hitter. But again, you have to kind of pump the brakes a little bit with huge performances like that. Castellanos is gone. Even if he stayed, you're probably having a little bit of a drop off. So, I mean, we're talking net year over year. Jonathan India, fantastic rookie of the year. I think he's still going to be great. But again, can you realistically expect what he did last year, this year? I would hope so as a fan. I think as a realist, you had to say maybe he takes a small step back, at sophomore type of thing. So again, we're talking about year over year, and this was an 83-win team. They have a very good trio of starting pitchers: Sonny Gray, Molly, Luis Castillo. Almost like the Oakland, though. I mean, are they going to deal? I mean, they were, Luis Castillo always seems like he's kind of talking about, trade rumors. So, are they going to be one that's looking to go young? They have young guys coming up through the system. That's part of why they let Miley walk. Vladimir Gutierrez got a lot of reps. Here's his second year. Is he going to develop more? They want to see Hunter Green, Reaver San Martin. They want to see these guys pitch. So I think you're going to have growing pains with this season, or with this team. Yeah,
that makes a ton of sense. Man, when you were talking about Votto, it gave me flashbacks to pretty much every day on Twitter, someone posting Joey Votto home run props, right?
Still
it was just
bangs,
like a daily
occurrence. I mean, the man was on fire, and it was amazing.
He really was.
Given his age and everything, it was
yeah, that was pretty amazing. Yeah, man.
Well, I would love to be surprised. That's all I have to say.
Right. Yeah, and you never know how some of those young guys step up, but that is Castellanos could be a big loss for sure. So, all right. Well, taking your own team, that's understandable, though. I tend to be a little pessimistic toward mine too. So
yeah.
All right, we got two left on the downside. Who's team number 4?
I'm going to go with the Seattle Mariners. I mean, just right off the rip, you're talking about 90-72 was their record. Win total was 72.5. They're kind of like the Giants. I mean, they were they were one win or one game away from making it to the wild card. So I mean, they made one hell of a run. But you look at their Pythag wins, 76 wins, and that's because they were outscored 697 to 748 runs. They were outscored by 50 runs, and they won 90 games. Okay, so there's just by the numbers, there's red flag number 1. Okay. Interestingly enough, they add a Cy Young winner. I mean, Robbie Ray's going there. Huge lift to the rotation.
Yeah, I just saw that, man.
Innings.
That's crazy.
So has he turned over this new leaf? I mean, he figured out how to slash his walk rate. Whatever's going on in his head last year is exactly what he needed to be for the last 5 years. And so if he can keep that walk rate down again this season, is it a Cy Young type of performance? Probably not, but he can still be super good, top tier level, especially if he can put in another 180, 190 innings. He joins Marco Gonzalez. He just really got tripped up with a lot of home runs. So if he can kind of get that dialed back in, he's going to be solid. Logan Gilbert still improving, but I'm warm on him. I think it's a league average group, pending a number 5, no disasters, no major setbacks. I think the rotation is still really good, especially with Ray. being able to provide that volume. The bullpen was insanely effective last season. So you got 45-27 record, 51 saves, 32 were blown. They had the third best FIP in the majors. They're high. Here's the thing. We're going to go back to kind of what these metrics say. It's not always about the numbers, but look back and you see some of their most high leverage relievers, Paul Sewald, Drew Steckenrider, Casey Sadler, with 86, 90% strand rates. I mean, these guys pitched a lot of innings too. Casey Sadler with a 188 BABIP. The other guys in the 250 range. So,
Wow.
the point being is you're probably not going to get that again next season. That was a very big part of why they were able to win by being outscored, is because when you can win those close ones, a lot of times it comes down to the end of the game. You need the bullpen to really pitch out of their mind, and they pitched well beyond their level. And obviously getting outscored by 50, it wasn't because they were getting blown up on the mound necessarily. Their offense was anemic all season. 18th best WRC. Batting average was last, and they're slugging 26th. So again, you don't even have average, and you don't even really have power. It wasn't their offense. They just had really, they were able to put it together, and it's not a knock. Hey, man, the players made it happen. But when we're looking at this logically, you're looking at a pretty big drop off. The thing is the offense could be better. I mean, Mitch Haniger, they finally got an injury-free season from him. He's the guy that they've been looking for. 30 home runs, 90 RBIs. That sort of repeat is likely. Ty France is another legit hitter. We don't know what Jared Kelenich's going to do. But, they got a second baseman, Adam Frazier from San Diego, who is, I think, fantastic type of guy for this lineup because he's a great on-base guy, a plus defender. He makes a great combination with JP Crawford at short. It's just a lot of moving parts with this team. I expect an improved offense. But the bottom line is we're kind of operating from a 76, 80 win baseline from last year, not a 90 win baseline. So even if you got improvements in the rotation, the bullpen's going to slide, the offense is going to be a little better, they still could just be an 80 win team next year.
Makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, Robbie Ray, that is potentially really huge. Looking at their other pitchers, I mean, obviously you know more coming into this season, but I'm thinking back to most of these were guys that I would at least consider fading when they were pitching. I mean, right. Marco Gonzalez, isn't he the guy that would just dominate lefties but just got destroyed by righties? Was that him or no?
Yeah, and he really gave up a lot of home runs last year too. That was pretty rough. But yeah, he's been good in seasons past. He's been good in seasons past. So, this is kind of one of those years where we need to find out whether that was a blip on the radar or, in fact, he's kind of declining already.
Yep. Man, this is the kind of team. I mean, I'm even thinking about other sports like the NBA, a team that overperformed. That depending on where numbers come out, that's the kind of team I wouldn't hate to fade, just because it's hard to win a preponderance of those really close games multiple years in a row. It just feels like at some point there's a little bit of regression there.
Yes.
But we'll see, I guess. So
I guess it's one of those where, kind of like numbers versus eye test type of thing. And I don't know, but I think, I don't know where this is going to open up for Seattle, the win total, but I mean, it can't be back up to 90 again. I mean,
right.
Even with Robbie Ray.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that they were outscored by 50 runs.
Right. You're not the only one who's bringing that info.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, we're to the last one here. What's the last team that you think might be trending down?
I actually kind of struggled with this.
Okay.
Finding teams that I thought were going to really collapse.
Okay.
But the Rockies were on my list. Of course, the Rockies were on my list last year, so they were one that kind of kicked me in the tail with the win total under. So I kind of thought maybe Arizona was going to be the team that Colorado was, which was not great, but better than we all expected. And instead, it was the opposite. You had a Colorado Rockies that just were extremely good at home. I mean, they were kind of like Dragon Slayers at home, which was really interesting. Some of the best. I mean, the Dodgers and the Padres were not immune at Colorado. So there was a lot of interesting things when you looked at their splits, whether it be the pitching, especially the offense. so much better, even ballpark adjusted offensive numbers. So really kind of interesting. I'm not really sure what to say about it. So I guess maybe it's because the frame that I had them in going into 2021, still hasn't changed for me that much. I'm still looking for, where they get all this. But, losing Trevor Story, losing John Gray is,
Yeah.
something.
Yep.
Even though Trevor Story didn't really go out on a high note, just like when Nolan Arenado left, his 2020 wasn't that great of a season. I mean, I think he was dealing with some shoulder things, so his defense wasn't that great and all that. But both of those guys, as great as they were, ironically, are leaving the team not on kind of a high point. So quote unquote replacing them wasn't as extreme on a year over year basis. Long term, totally different story. But I think that's why you got to see somebody like Ryan McMahon. I mean, he filled in
Yeah.
fantastically at third base, played a little bit of second base, but really did fantastic job. I think 23 home runs. So just what you would expect to be a big drop off from 20 to 21 just never really happened. So McMahon did a fantastic job there. I just don't know what you get out of CJ Crone. Uh, Obviously a pretty powerful hitter, but if he can keep it up from last year or the momentum that he had a little bit, it's good for them, especially in that park. He's a doubles kind of guy. But now you have an aging Charlie Blackmon. Now he's a corner outfielder, but he doesn't have corner outfield power. Sam Hilliard, Jonathan Daza, Garrett Hampson. I think those are the kind of guys that filled in really well in center field and try to make the most of the offense, but they just have really limited bats. We'll see if Connor Joe is the bright spot that they need to be. I'm down on them again. Probably again now in the lower 60s, but I don't know if I can bet it. It just depends what they put out on it this year.
Yeah. That makes sense. This team almost reminded me, and we used to live in Colorado, so I enjoyed going to Rockies games and follow them a little bit because of that. But it almost reminded me when I think back to betting these teams to the Orioles last year, where in certain
Ooh,
spots I really loved betting both of those teams because they had the
yeah,
capability to have offensive explosions. And then you'd get like a game out of German Marquez, especially at home, where it was like, man, this guy just performs well in Coors, right?
yeah,
For whatever reason, which is weird. So it felt like this was a team where, like, we were talking about, I don't even remember if it was before he got on the stream, but the sports where there's games every day where you just have to keep a pulse on things. That
yep,
felt true with a team like the Rockies last year, where if you could get
sure,
the right spots, they were a good bet, but then they could also just get destroyed on a given day too. So
sure. And we were out there in July. We went to a Rockies game and we watched them play the Cardinals. It was actually a really entertaining game, and both teams were really game. And I think it went extras. Colorado, I think, or St. Louis came back, I think, and won it in extras. But the Colorado team, they fought, man. They looked good. They were hitting pretty well. I think I just have some sort of bias against CJ Crone because I did have the first 5 inning over, and it was bottom of the fifth. Crone was up, 2 outs, like men on first and second, and I just needed one more run, and he flew out or something like that.
yeah.
And ever since then, I've just kind of been, I don't know about that guy, even though he like crushed kind of in the second half. But
Yeah.
when I needed it, and that's all I needed to see.
I feel like that's something that happens in betting too. When
It
somebody
does.
lets you down in a spot you
Yeah.
need, you're like, they're a bum, man. I can't count on them ever.
I can never forgive Kirk Cousins for acts of certain types.
I can't forgive Kirk Cousins either. But all right, man. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much for doing this. I
You
was
got it.
excited that you said you were up for it. This has been
Of
super
course.
fun for me because I'm looking forward to baseball this year, but
Me
haven't been
too.
able to do a lot of research. So appreciate getting some of this knowledge. I mean, most people who would see this probably know, but in case people don't, will you just tell people kind of what you do through the baseball season and how they can keep up with what you're doing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Me and my partner Yanni, old friends, 25 years. We just kind of came up with a blog site at the BetCrushers. Our Twitter is at the BetCrushers. And so during football, he's manning that, putting things out during baseball season. I'm getting daily handicaps out in the morning. I usually do all it first early in the morning before I head off to work. And I try to make it 4 or 5 times a week, to be able to do that. So I like to get kind of my best bet out there, and maybe get 1, 2, maybe even 3 handicaps in there, just to give people a little bit of perspective on what I'm looking at. So
Yeah, so definitely go and follow JJ and Yanni at the BetCrushers on Twitter if you're not. I will just say too, for me, one of the things I love that you do is JJ does phenomenal write-ups, like really in depth,
thank you.
really strong data backing up the stuff he's talking about. And one of the things that I've at least tried to do with the breakdown in general is, whether you like the side I'm on or not, that you get strong data and trends and stuff to be able to make decisions. And JJ does that in spades when it comes to baseball. So you absolutely want to be following along and seeing what he's putting out. So
I appreciate that. You're one. There's a few others that really do phenomenal jobs of making the case. And you're right. It may not be about whether you want everybody to agree with you. I don't want everybody to agree with me.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just doing this, and don't ask me why we're doing this, but yeah, we're just doing it. We're kind of giving a little insight into what we're thinking into something. But it's cool because I've always valued seeing people's work, whatever it may be, whether it's, audio, video, written, even short 140, I don't know, we're up to 280 characters.
I don't know how much.
Yeah, whatever.
It tells me when I'm over. That's all I know.
But sometimes there's things in it that it's like, and maybe you're looking at a game a different way, and it kind of points you towards maybe not necessarily it could be a prop, could be some sort of total angle, whatever it may be, that, you've already taken a look at this game, and now somebody has a little different spice to throw in there. I've always appreciated people like that.
Yep. 100%, man. Awesome. Well, thanks for jumping on, and I'm sure we'll continue connecting as we actually get into this baseball season. So
got it. Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot, man. Yep.
Hey,
thanks for watching, everybody. And we will be back on Thursday morning with the next breakdown for the NBA as we jump back in. Have a good night.